How have you been keeping, mate?
Been keeping all good, mate. All good. Nice to be on here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for coming on. So before we get stuck into your rugby/career story, mate, where was home for you and who lived with you as a kid?
So home for me was Hull. I'm from one of the villages just outside of Hull, and growing up was parents and two older brothers. So two brothers who are 4 and 6 years older than me, and yeah, I've only got fond memories of childhood. So I've got kind of close knit family and um, all I could ever really ask for in terms of growing up. Lots of opportunities and well supported. So yeah.
So was the house competitive, mate, having two older brothers, first up, best dressed, and things like that?
So those two were closer in age than me. So those two were
Yeah.
always competing. I think what it did do for me was all the rules were already broken by the time I got to that kind of age. Whether it was going out or girlfriends or hanging out with mates, whatever it was, all the rules were already broken for me. So it was happy days for me.
I don't like that. That's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? Let them do the damage and you just clean up.
I just want,
No, I
yeah, I
don't
just
like
walk
it.
in and take over it.
So was sports a thing for you as a kid, mate? So would you have been out on a local field with your bike upside down playing football? Would it be rugby, cricket, tennis? What was you into?
Yeah, you look at kind of kids growing up now and probably showing my age a bit, like growing up, you enjoyed just being out with your mates, whether it was cycling, like you say, or climbing things, or playing whatever sport, kicking a ball against a wall, playing catch, playing cricket, chucking a rugby ball around, like whatever it was, you're just happy kid, like very way we were brought up. We've got sociable parents and just interactions with all the kids around us, whether it was through school or clubs or whatever. Um, and just yeah, spending time out and probably other stuff would be just standard stuff through your childhood, playing video games, again showing age. Whether remember my brothers were on BBCs and Amigas and stuff like that. I was a bit younger
A
than
little bit before me, yeah.
that. I was a bit younger than that. What was mine? Mine was N64 GoldenEye or
Oh, was you? I was the Sega, me. Yeah,
Sega, yeah,
yeah.
Sega Game Gears and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, just standard things. But as I said, from a childhood, I couldn't have asked for any more. We had a really good kind of family upbringing, but also just the standard things which you take for granted, really, looking at other people from different backgrounds and just kind of happy home and good friends and good kind of, as I said, like opportunities and support around you to try and be the best version of you growing up.
I don't like that, mate. So was there any club sport for you?
So club sports, I guess that's the one thing which I didn't really do at a young age. So I was very kind of open to any sports. So I'd be playing football, rugby, cricket, like you said, tennis not so much, maybe badminton, anything,
Yeah.
even chess, like literally darts, like playing all sorts of stuff. But from a club, we didn't do extracurricular clubs as such, playing. We would have gone swimming and clubs and things like that, maybe badminton a little bit. But that was the one thing I didn't really do was football and rugby. So where I went to school, so it was one of the nicest schools in Hull at the time, school called Heimers, and the opportunities you had there from sport, it was kind of football through your junior school and cricket, and that then led to rugby in senior school. So I miss playing footy going
Yeah.
into senior school, but yeah, like if you think about it now, like other mates would have been playing football at clubs outside or cricket or things like that outside at clubs. So no wonder they were a bit better than me probably now thinking about it. But
You didn't miss out though, Ronnie, did you? Because you had that embrace of childhood.
yeah,
Yeah. Plus,
Absolutely.
all the sports you mentioned, sorry, they're all contributing to what further you wanted to do anyway. Not only is it working the body coordination and that, but you're talking about chess and stuff where you really have to think about things and strategies and movements.
Yeah, I think that there's a big thing in kind of sports about kind of early specialization and how that's not necessarily a good thing if you're learning just, I mean, you've seen how competitive it is nowadays. We were probably more right, knuckle down and do your studies and work hard, and then you'll get your just rewards, do all the other stuff as more enjoyment rather than pushing us to become a rugby player or a sportsman. But nowadays you've seen how competitive it is with kids. Like they're doing all sorts, chatting to some of our mates, they're doing 3 4 different sports, they're out all hours of the day, and kind of taking their kids from club to club to club and really giving it a real push in when you're covering academy sports, seeing kind of how serious it's been taken. Some of the enjoyment sometimes can get lost in that. um, but yeah, there's something to be said about kind of not specializing early and getting that overall skill set from loads of different things, like you mentioned. So whether it's team sports or individual sports, or like you've said, whether it's different sports with hand-eye coordination and tackle bags and all sorts of stuff. Um, so yeah, lots of different sports. So I kind of was part of the teams in school at football and cricket, and then that then led to I was at the same school for 10 years. So in a way, that was good from all year at that age, all year kind of friendship groups already made going into senior school. But the big switch for us was we started rugby union throughout our senior school year.
Yeah. So, what type of student was you, mate? Was it something you enjoyed, or was it more social for you?
Yeah, good question. I think student wise, if you ask my parents, my mum would probably say I was so laid back, I was almost horizontal, and I was whatever I kind of applied myself to, I was good at.
Yeah.
I wasn't excelling at it, but I was good at it. And
Do you
then
reckon it's because you knew that, Ronnie? Sorry, mate. You knew you were, yeah, good at it, so you coasted a little bit, maybe.
no, I think it's more, yeah, I if I didn't know something, I'd apply myself to it. And I was good at doing that and then putting in a bit of hard work. But yeah, mum would say I was probably very laid back and just took everything in my stride, which was when there's something which really interests you, like for example, sports medicine and working in sport. She was a bit shocked at how seriously you take it and all the kind of hoops you have to go through and how like you've changed into this hardworking guy. Where's that been all these years? So, so yeah, I'd say I was laid back and definitely enjoyed the challenge of work to a degree. But she was the odd one out, mum in our household. She was a maths teacher, and all the rest of us are doctors. So it's a pretty boring,
Right.
pretty boring dinner table when we were growing up. All sorts of medical chat, but um, yeah, she was the kind of person who'd be like, I'd just say, just give us the answer, and then she wouldn't give me the answer. She'd want me to work it through and
Yeah.
get to the right answer. And I was just like, no, no, just give us the answer. I just need to get it right to get my mark. And I guess by having that kind of someone actually challenging you a little bit makes you think, doesn't it, on your own feet?
Yeah.
And I know that's a bit of a random example through maths, but it definitely made us think a little bit more and apply ourselves. And we use that now when we've got other people who come to us, and whether it's shadowing experience or things like that, it's things aren't black and white, and you've got to kind of stand on your own 2 feet and think things through. Don't just kind of don't be afraid to be wrong. Just give things a go, and if you're wrong, then obviously we can talk that through. But equally, you need to kind of challenge and understand things. So if someone asks you another question, then you've got an answer to it.
So how long has it took you to embrace that? That's something I like what you've just said there, mate, is don't afraid to be wrong. When could was you always someone that could just leave an error behind once you'd found the
Uh,
solution?
no, I think everyone kind of growing up. You're not taught to be like that. You're taught more to to kind of shy away and almost I'm embarrassed to say something, put my hand up and be the first person to get something wrong. But it's funny when you're the first person who does something, the amount of people who might follow if it's obviously a right thing, and that's part of leadership, isn't it? So no, I definitely wasn't like that when I was younger. I think you only grasp that when you're older and you're making your own mistakes, and everyone makes mistakes and you've got to learn from them. You just that's just part and parcel of life, isn't it?
Yeah. And when you entered that sport arena at senior school, mate, did you feel comfortable in that? Did you thrive in that once? That it's sort of club like, isn't it? Did you thrive in that environment, mate?
Yeah, well, we're saying it's not club environment. Like I said, a few people would have had kind of rugby. It's a shame we didn't have football in senior school because we had a great team like through those early years. But um, rugby wise, we had a handful of guys who've probably gone through various clubs and learned how to play. I remember probably one of the first training sessions. It was just going tackling bags. Didn't have a clue how to tackle. Went in and headbutted it, and everyone you're on about.
Good start though.
Yeah, I was definitely probably looking back, probably concussed. But in terms of that, it was. You were talking about making mistakes and laughing it off and getting back up and doing going for it. That was one of them. So yeah, like I said, I got two older brothers. They both. I mean, God knows how I managed to reach the position I did. One of them's about my height, 5'8", and wider than me, and another one 6 foot and a big burly unit. And then I was a kind of slight figure at later on at 5'8", and then for some reason the teacher decided to whack me in at prop just because my brothers were props. So our uh, our front
Sorry.
row, our front row ended up being up until fifth form. I think at fifth form they finally realised after 5 years of playing. I think the front row was me at 10 stone, hooker, and then our other prop was 18 stone, 6 foot.
Yeah,
So
well, that took some doing that for you then, mate, didn't it?
I had to learn how to get down on the scrum just a ten
You
times
did
lower than
quickly.
everyone else.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that then led to me kind of moving. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting smashed here. So then I ended up going back into back row and playing flanker, not to any decent standard. But I say that our school we were lucky as from a teachers and coaching wise, and we were playing some very good schools on the circuit. Schools which have got plenty of superstar players. So schools like Ampleford, Sedbergh, Estonia. So playing against some of them, we used to play in the Daily Mail Cup, and we were good. I think one year we ended up reaching the quarters of that national competition. But I was in a strange position where I ended up skipping a year of school, so I ended up skipping year three. Not the most important years of school, but I ended up skipping a year because, like I said, out of my brothers, one of them ended up going through school like normal. The other one ended up skipping a year. So for some weird reason, in early years of school, I said to the headmaster, "Look, I want to do the same as him. I want to skip a year." So that allowed me to end up playing for both years. I could play for my year and the year below. So it meant double cup competitions, double sport, and everything. So yeah, it was enjoyable times.
Yeah. No, there's some adjusting there. Like, 'cause no offense to like school teachers and that, because a lot of them don't teach you the dark arts. They're only like you're playing front row there, and it's not just a straightforward
Oh,
position. Like people will want to in rugby union, we call it turn your inside out a little bit, won't they? Or like try and hurt you,
I'd
like,
turn
and you're
myself
not the
inside
biggest
out. I
bloke.
think. I think I'd turn
Yeah.
myself inside out at that age. And one guy's 8 stone heavier than me. Yeah.
That's it, isn't it? It's like you need to find the little bits that he can't do, haven't you? When they're that much bigger than you.
Yeah, yeah. You got to think on your feet, do something different. Yeah.
That's it. So when do you think you maybe? Because obviously we're going to talk about what you do in a little bit in the chat. But did you ever notice yourself looking at sport differently through the eyes of what your job is now? So could you spot little things that people could prevent doing?
Yeah, I mean, back then, no, I wouldn't have said, from a medical knowledge, I wouldn't have said anything. I think if you look back at how how kind of school sport has, especially at that kind of level, has moved on, it's crazy, like in a good way. Like I remember, I think we were playing Sedbergh, and I'd been got picked up, ran into them 10 times bigger than us, their team, but I ran into their smallest fly half, and he's just picked me up. That's turned into the dump. That's then turned into a spear tackle. He's dropped me from like probably a foot off the ground straight onto my neck. And then I remember going off, and I must have been like afraid to even move at that point. And I went off, and it was an important game, and the teacher was like, "You all right?" I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And then I go back on the pitch. If that happened nowadays in a game, no chance. Like that wouldn't
No,
happen.
the
And
splint and everything's out, isn't it? And
you
yeah,
completely different kind of way of looking at things. And obviously, medicine moves on, technology moves on, and people know what wasn't right back then. Obviously, through experiences, is created a safer game for everyone, if you like, and or trying to make a safer game for everyone. I look now, and there's all sorts of kind of concussion protocols and things like that out for school teams, and um, it's good. Yeah, it's good. I think going back to your question of did I think differently, just I knew I was never going to be an elite sports person, and I've always loved sport. Like I said before, whatever the sport was, whether it was rugby, football, squash, snooker, or darts, I just loved playing it. I loved watching it, and in my head, with a medical background of my brothers and dad, I always had a fascination with how the human body works, and getting people better, whether it's kind of injuries or physical mental ailments. So I always thought, how can I combine those two things together? And that then led me at an early age to think, right, I want to be the sports doc. So how can I get into that? And after going through uni, etc., which we'll probably go into later, yeah, I forged a career in that, obviously.
right. So with that happening pretty early, mate, did you take sport really serious until education got serious, and then did sport give a little bit?
No, I don't think. I think because I was good. I was good at the vast majority of sports that I did, whether it was in school or outside. But I wasn't the best, and by that I knew at that kind of early age, and probably rightly or wrongly, like I said, we've had a very good upbringing, and parents were always like, "Look, work hard, do whatever you want in terms of career choices, etc. But work hard, and then the rest will follow." And I think looking back, we had that kind of mindset where I was always more right, focus on your studies, etc. But massively enjoyed sports, but it was more enjoyment rather than pushing myself to compete at elite levels. So I think I had trials in cricket for like Yorkshire, but I never made it past that. In rugby, like never had kind of trials going into kind of county stuff. But like I said, we were at a school where it was highly competitive anyway, and you were playing against kind of very good players, and that led to kind of the probably looking back a lot of skills which are applicable to life again, like that rugby scenario. You think what you enjoy doing, or you maybe you didn't really enjoy it at the time, whether it was playing out in rain, snow, ice, and wind, and then doing fitness sessions at school on a Monday night, and just things like that. When you look back and you're like, you didn't enjoy it and you didn't appreciate it maybe at that point in time, but there was such a good range of skills which kind of set you up, whether it's kind of teamwork or just hard work, like as in grind stuff where you're like, what were you doing? But you look back, and obviously as the other side of it from a medical standpoint now, when you're looking at players, whether it's pre-season or whatever, putting in kind of hard yards, and you appreciate obviously the hard work it takes, and fans don't necessarily see all of that hard work behind the scenes.
No, definitely, mate. So when you're in them levels in cricket, which I think been a bit modest about, really, Ronnie, haven't you? Like that's quite a big deal in like again from an outsider looking into cricket because I've never delved into it other than probably like you just got like the quick cricket set out in school and that. It's like I imagine it's being elitist sport, like quite clicky, hard to get your face involved if you've not come right through. Like probably people think about rugby or football, but say you've not been playing from six, you've done very well breaking them all, getting in at that point, haven't you?
Well, from a cricket wise, I mean, my background's Indian, and my dad's absolutely obsessed with cricket, and from a that it was maybe playing or just with mates or outside of school a bit, but school wise started from year four onwards, and I was probably very good in all the years where I look back and it was less important. Say you're under 12s, under 13s, when people were gradually getting better and better. I probably peaked at that point, and
You probably understood the basics
yeah, maybe.
better than most. Yeah.
So I ended up probably having trials then, but we we ended up again lucky looking back at the kind of experiences you had. We ended up through school going to Barbados on a cricket tour, and
Wow.
wow, what an experience that was! Like, as a young guy going there, and I think I was the only player at that point. This shows the level of everyone else's. If there was a graph trajectory of showing other people improving and peaking at all the right years, I was probably lucky to get on that trip. I think at the end, and I was gone from the fastest bowler in the team to just right arm slow and hopeless, and low in the order. In fact, I think I was the only player on tour who contributed nothing in terms of cricket wise. So
There's
looking
worse
back,
places to contribute nothing, though, isn't there?
well, exactly, yeah. To do that in the Caribbean's not bad. I mean, thinking about that, I didn't bowl the ball. I batted. I was out for a golden duck, and
Yeah.
then I probably caught the best catch ever, which anyone's ever seen in school cricket. It was a no ball, didn't count. So, yeah, looking back, not my best moment now.
You know what though? But that's why I do this for them memories, mate. And how good must that have been for a younger you? That
Oh, like you just again, you probably think it's semi-normal at the time. You're excited to be going somewhere like that with your mates, but you don't think like, as in how privileged you are to be doing something like that. And wow, yeah, unbelievable experience. And yeah, not much more to say. It was an incredible experience doing that, and very fortunate to be in a position when you look at other people and how difficult they have it, and you're off to Barbados on a cricket trip.
I love that, mate. I love that. So medicine and sport, mate, combined now, which we're going to talk further education. But was sport always going to be where you wanted to practice?
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
from that early age, it was how do I involve those two kind of passions? So the medical side of things, helping people, the kind of interest in how the human body works, and then that love of all the different kinds of sport. I think in my head, I've always been like a football fan, and it was how can I join the two? How can you get involved in whether it's footy or, like we said, cricket, rugby, whatever it was? How can I join those two? So I knew from an early age I wanted to do it. I just didn't have a clue how to do it. And um, back then, looking back, I think we there wasn't anything really set in place in this country as like a formal program. I think you look back at how it was as probably when I was at school, it was more like old school GPs or docs who were covering teams, and whether or not they were getting paid with a couple of season tickets or a bottle of whiskey at Christmas, it was more like that, and a privilege of covering a team. And obviously it's a big privilege, and covering a sports team, whatever it is, and you're in a really good position to kind of, which is the envy of a lot of your colleagues, whether in NHS work or other things. But yeah, there was no formal program as such back then, so you ended up kind of carving your career that way. So to get kind of guidance and other bits like you do in other professions, I was thinking how to do that. So just went through medical school, and during that, anything I could do to get my hands on to do sports related kind of work experience, we
Yeah.
did. And that was probably the best thing I did at that point. Like I was saying earlier, like as in how you kind of not necessarily coasting through, but you're doing what you need to get kind of through, and being more laid back about it. I probably upped it a couple of gears to think, right, how do I stand out here to kind of get involved in sport and push that side.
Yeah. And for viewers and listeners, mate, like the avenues weren't there like they are now when we were growing up. So you didn't have the behind the scenes stuff, did you? You didn't have GoPros, body cams, you didn't have clubs promoting jobs or opportunities or internships. You didn't have people that were doing them things, showing people like us that you could do
Yeah,
them things.
absolutely. Yeah,
So that social media in so many ways is amazing, as much as it can be damaging.
yeah. Now I agree.
So you done it the hard way, mate, and did that sort of help you to embrace people in a different way? So you're having to ask for opportunities, I imagine, aren't you? And are you learning how to network in that as well as become involved in
Yeah,
medicine and sport?
I think things now are so much more competitive than they were even for us, and people probably say the same thing when we were growing up. If you forget kind of the sports arena for a sec, just like even medical school, we probably about 10 years ago, we interviewed medical students coming through, and the kind of experience and stuff they're doing is crazy. Like, as in, it's so much. Like, it was doing more than we were probably as medical students, and that's how competitive it's got. And similarly in sport, we look back, like now I've been working in it since, when was it, 2015, I think. And in terms of in elite sport, and in terms of watching in the last few years, like people coming through, they've done everything like as in they need to do, like in terms of ticking boxes from qualifications and other things. But um, that's how competitive it's got. They're doing all sorts of shadowing and experience as much as they can, but you can't substitute that learning on the job, that actual experience. Whatever kind of career path you choose, I think anyone will say that it's not in a textbook, is it? It's you can't teach um, whatever it is, and you learn from experience. And when people said that when I was probably younger and going through, you almost took that as a bit of an insult that, well, look how hard I've worked to reach this point. Like, as in, you shouldn't really be saying that. Like, as in, look how hard I've been working. But it's completely true. Like, as in, 5 years at medical school won't teach you what the first day on a ward will be like, or completing your qualifications to work in sports, and then your first day actually dealing with XYZ on a sports field is completely different. You'll have never done anything
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, like as in going back, I think the hands-on experience, whatever career you go down, is clearly how you learn.
Everything's about experience, not just vocation, but life, isn't it? You're learning every day on the job, aren't we? So
Absolutely, yeah.
like, I can imagine it's really competitive. But when you were going through medical school, mate, uh, how was it? Is it really intense from the off?
I loved it. Like
Yeah,
we were from a kind of family where we, and again, because my brothers had kind of been through it, I probably had a bit of an insight. And clearly, you've got to work hard, but it's not all about that. Like, you can still have a good time and work hard. So going to uni, even though like I said, I'm a all the kind of rules were broken by my older brothers growing up, like as in still it's you going off for the first time, living in the big bad world by yourself. So all the way over an hour away in Leeds. So we're kind of living over there and new experiences and making new mates. Like a few schoolmates were over there, which was nice, kind of settling in. But
Yeah.
otherwise, just all of a sudden you can do whatever you want, and whatever that means. You're not forced to play rugby or football or cricket or go to lessons. All of a sudden you're allowed to do whatever you want, whatever your interest is, and that's quite kind of appealing, isn't it? You can kind of go through whatever path you wanted. And yeah, again, I only look back with kind of fondness for it. You worked hard for sure. Like you look back, it was kind of 40-hour weeks of lectures, but 9 to 5, 9 to 3, 9 to like 4 kind of lectures. But at the same time, you were still going out at night, and you had the responsibility of getting up because you knew you've paid tuition fees, nothing like today, but you've paid tuition fees, or your parents have, to put you through this. So you almost force yourself to go off and do that, and then you do the learning outside of it. And it was hard, but yeah, very rewarding. I think you only appreciate that when you do other things. So having mates in other doing other degrees, but we did a different degree. Again, just talking about bringing it back to sport, we the first opportunity I had to do any sort of qualification of sport, I took it doing something called intercalating, where through medical school you can do a different degree for a year. So we did sports science for a year at Leeds again, and we joined their toughest year, which it was. It was a hard year, but it was 8-10 hours a week of lectures. And you were like, but I'm used to doing 40 odd hours of lectures here. So like, this is going to be a doddle. And then you almost felt embarrassed saying that, but you'd go in and you do the work there, and you were like, this is class. Like I'm doing kind of 8-10 hours there of work, and it was still tough work, but you're only used to what you're used to, right? So
Yeah.
working hard like that through medical schools definitely set you up in a good way to push through life lessons wise. You've got to work hard, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't do all the other stuff. You can definitely enjoy yourself, and as much as you can, burn the candle both ends, and without kind of tiring yourself out.
No, it is. It's about working hard and playing hard on, isn't it? It's risk and reward, like you just said. Basically, it's about learning.
Yeah.
So when you're at medical school, mate, and you you done this other degree as well, are you reaching out to sports franchises or clubs,
Yeah.
local
So
teams, amateur, pro?
yeah. So from in England, not so much. Like as in again, if you look back at kind of me, despite me kind of pushing various things, people are doing all sorts nowadays, and in a good way. Like as in, it's
Yeah,
like I said, it's become so much more competitive. We get so many people, whether it's on LinkedIn or emails or through club secretaries or whoever, contacting, and it's our duty, because we've been through the same path. It's our duty
yeah,
to obviously take the time and respond back to these people, and whether or not it's a negative, we're sorry, we can't take you on because we've got X, Y, Z people in front of you who are taking it, or people further on through their careers who want the opportunity to do it. That you've got to kind of take the time and efforts to do that. But no, back then we ended up having a time in towards the back end of your medical school where you do something called an elective, where you can do a 10-week placement somewhere. So people are traveling all over the world and doing different things, and as long as it's medical related. So as soon as we got that opportunity, we contacted these guys in New Zealand, and don't know if you heard of the Waikato team in rugby union over there. So
yeah,
over in Hamilton, we contacted the sports med guy over there, the doc, and that was an unbelievable experience. We'd kind of went over there travel the world, and then ended up doing a few weeks placement with the Waikato doctor over there, and they're so far ahead back then to
Yeah.
the UK, New Zealand, Australia in the way their sports medicine structure was set up, and it was very professional, and just gave us a real appetite kind of to push on and think I could actually make this into a career here. Just what we got exposed to there really kind of whet the appetite.
Yeah. I can imagine. So it's probably a little bit mind blowing when you're in our system, mate, isn't it? And doing things how we do it here. So I think that's a really good idea. And what I also like, mate, is the fact you will respond and to people like inquiring and applying, because I think not knowing is worse, isn't it?
Yeah,
So when you don't get nothing, it's so I like that, mate, and I like the fact there's as much as you're saying it's our duty because we've been there. You're acting on it as well. You're not just saying it, because a lot will just say it, Ron. I'm not asking you to name people, but a lot will say it and not act on it, though, mate, won't they? And I like the way you're still really humble enough to respond to that and acknowledge like somebody's journey. And you'd no doubt just talking to you for the last hour or so. Wish them very well on it as well.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think from a whether it's sports stars or music or whichever kind of famous people or Joe blogs that you're dealing with, at the end of the day, everyone's a human being. Everyone's normal. Like as in, everyone
Yeah,
still breathes the same air, and you've got to kind of act with that kind of humility and be humble to respond back to people. If you can't do that, then you got to start questioning questioning what's going on. If you can't do the basics like that, right? Because you once upon a time were in that position. So yeah,
yeah. Was there any appetite to potentially go back out to Waikato and experience that for a bit longer?
from what was interesting was probably last year. This guy who took us in, he's like a big deal and still is in New Zealand sports medicine circles. And I was at a conference in I think it was an Olympic conference in France, and saw this guy, and I was like, why the hell do I recognize him? And it was the guy who took us in over there for a few weeks into his home while we did like the Waikato placement with him. Went over to him and I was like, you won't remember me at all, but like 15 odd years ago, we stayed at your house for like a few weeks, and he took us in and shadows us like we've moved on now and this is how we're progressing our career, etc. He didn't have a clue who I was, but he was
Yeah,
like, that's it, that's incredible. Like as in, obviously from his point of view, that he's semi-proud that people who've taken an opportunity, or he's given us an opportunity to go over there and experience that, have gone on and created their own career, whatever the sport may be. Um, but yeah, in terms of sports medicine, there's certain countries where you can directly move over, and others where you can't. So me moving over to um, Australia or New Zealand might be easier than me moving over to America, for example. Or a foreign doc coming over to working in the UK. It's not as easy as just kind of switching over, and you have to go back to square one really, and do all sorts of exams and things to get to the standard they want, or hoops they want you to go through to reach their requirements to be a doc over there.
and that's a bit off-putting then, isn't it? It'd be like a bit of a dream quashing after everything you've put yourself through just to get to where you are now, sort of thing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
similarly, most countries do that because as a doc, it's a lot harder. As a physio, there's ways probably around it where you can work in other countries, but it's if the desire's there, then definitely you can go off and do it.
and no disrespect to anyone regarding the pyramid of views were work-wise, but would the physio be answerable to you, or do you work in conjunction more to one being higher than the other?
Got to be careful here. Got to be careful how I answer.
Sorry, and that's yeah, that's why I don't
No, I
want to
think
like offend anyone.
yeah, I think it's interesting probably for your listeners that people often call us physios, and they don't know what the difference is, or are you the guy who kind of sits in the crowd? Are you the guy who's kind of pit side? Are you like, what do you do? Are you just dishing out paracetamol on the side? What are you doing? That's a running joke for years with players from wherever. It's the same old jokes, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, physios are more your kind of day to day and rehabbing and diagnosing, rehabbing players and doing that. And probably whether docs like it or not, we're they're very kind of important to the day to day running of a club, 100%. And you're working as a doctor in conjunction with that. And depending on your skill set, you are dealing with how the same way you deal with common ailments, whether it's you, me, or anyone else in general public, where you've got primary care, general practice kind of problems. So you're dealing with all that kind of side of stuff. But then depending on your skill set, you're then dealing with musculoskeletal problems as well. So whether it's that second pair of eyes or different opinion with um, working alongside the physio, diagnosing kind of the injuries, and then whether that means kind of examining or scanning them, and then after that treatments, so whether or not that's injections or pushing on to various specialists. And yeah, it's very much what we call an MDT, multidisciplinary team. And your docs, your physios, they're not working, or they should not be working in isolation. For a successful team, everyone's kind of pulling together and working, because you all should be working for that same kind of results slash success. So whether it's us, and then on top of that, you'll have lots of other people who are important cogs in the medical team, whether it's nutritionists or psychologists, um, sports therapists. So lots of different medical professionals who work together as that team.
And like years ago, I imagine physios would have been either like preventative or rehab, wouldn't they? The sort of hybrid now, and they cover all aspects. Or am I wrong in thinking they were separate then?
So physios, again, it depends on kind of the sport and level, or what the team organisation are wanting. Because from the vast majority of sports I've been involved in, your physio or lead physio is generally a head of service, head of medical service. And that's because they can provide that whole, in inverted commas, package, if you like, of diagnosis and treatment, rehab, etc. However, there'll be other teams, and in whether it's elite football or some rugby teams, where the head of medicals are doctors, and that in itself will bring a completely different skill set, and in that person's eyes might be a much better fit for the medical team to be led by a doctor versus a physio. But the teams I'm involved in, the head of medicals are generally very experienced physios who've probably gone through years of doing the pitch side and doing multiple training and games and all of that, and then decided to go more down a managerial type of route. And having to, it's not as simple as doing your diagnosing and treating it like you would do in a GP surgery. It's where you're kind of seeing a patient, and then you're making a management plan. You can imagine with the demands of elite sport, it's not just you and the patient, which it should be. You're
Yeah.
working with the patient's best interests, but you've got multiple other stakeholders involved in a sporting arena, whether it's the team, what's best for the player, what's best for the team, what's best for, you've got the manager breathing down your neck, you've got owners, you've got all sorts of other stakeholders, which are not kind of, you shouldn't dismiss them, but equally they're not the most important thing. The most important thing is the safety of the player, obviously, and you shouldn't get lost in that. But obviously, all of those things do play a part.
So Does it take much within to stand by your models when you get the outside noise come in and say, we've got an important game in 3 weeks, but you've said, just as a round figure five, can you push this? And because, mate, there's undoubtedly been many times that happens, probably weekly, even daily. And then on the other, how do you keep players on the straight and narrow and sticking to processes and systems of rehab and stuff? Because it must be like repetitive, it must be tedious sometimes, but them little moments, mate, are the ones that make the biggest difference, aren't they?
Yeah. So
Sorry, I think I went off on you there a little
no,
bit,
that's
didn't
a
I?
good. Yeah, it's a good question, and it's can be difficult if we go back to what we were chatting about earlier. It's you can have got all the qualifications and you've read everything in your textbook. It doesn't teach you that day. And
No.
from a experience, you imagine kind of the fresh faced person you were back in the day going through that, and despite being a very laid back person and thinking you've got it semi sorted, it's not that easy. And in fact, one of my first memories of that was at Bradford, and just the external pressures was Jimmy Lowe won't mind me saying. I just remember from I can't remember who Bradford were playing, but we're going through a bit of a rough patch, and it was like my first month of probably being there, and some old fan had somehow managed to make his way through the tunnel and was effing and blinding at Jimmy, and Jimmy's then come back into the changing room and gone quiet. Whole place is just quiet, and then I'm just on the opposite side of the changing room to him. He's just picked up the biggest bin you can find with everything in it and just chucked it my way. And I'm just like, is this elite sport? Like, what on earth's going on? It's absolute mayhem. Um, but yeah, like you can't succumb to what a manager or an owner or a player or other members of your staff necessarily want when it's not in the best interests from the player, and then by doing that, actually the best interests of the team, the best interests of those other stakeholders. And it takes a lot of good relationships, a lot of experience, a lot of um, ways, methods to kind of figure out how to pass on that message. it's
It's a lot of courage as well, Ronnie, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it is. And if you imagine that fresh-faced person is going to have less courage to make those kind of bold decisions and stand by their kind of guns, and when you've got people pushing or telling you otherwise, even now, like as in, I'm not sat here like a finished article at all. I've got plenty to learn, and people who are 20 years more experienced than me, they'll every day is kind of brings a different challenge and um, something which you can't believe, like as in you've not experienced something like that before. We say it multiple times in a season, whatever the sport is. Like I've never, I've done all sorts, but I've not experienced something like that. And there's not many careers where you can say that. Like every day is different, and obviously the more sports and different positions you put yourself in, you kind of exposing yourself to all those. But what it does do is it builds you a good foundation to have that skill set to deal with those situations better.
yeah. No, thanks for that, mate. Sorry, I appreciate it. It just come into my mind. It must be very tricky. And James Laws is someone I grew up loving as well. Like
Yeah,
he was an icon for Bradford, wasn't he? And stuff. So it's like certain sports because you've deviated in sport, which we will go on, but certain movements can cope in an injury and still be executed well, can't they? In some genre of sport where that same injury in another sport would rule you out because you're constantly making that twist or that movement, that pressure on wherever that did that make sense?
yeah, yeah,
You can brush over
100%,
it in some sports, can't you, mate?
100%. And if you again football's a lot sexier than rugby in terms of popularity, and you talk to a younger sports doc or physio, and lots of them will want to work in football, and that's where like their interest is. And what I'd always encourage, in fact, in the last kind of 3 months, 6 months, that we've had someone who's very, very experienced in NHS type work who's come to us, and he was just like, how do I get involved in football? It's like, you don't get involved in football, you get involved in like learning sports medicine. And there's games in football where you could be sat there not doing anything. Like, then people, obviously, as a fan, that's what you will see, but you will be doing stuff before, during, and after. But what I mean is actual pitch side stuff. You can be perceived to be sat there doing nothing, whereas in rugby, you're continuously doing everything. So whether it's a contact sport like rugby or taekwondo or hockey or whatever it is, that's where you may get your learning, because you're constantly on very high alert that something's happening, and more often than not, something is happening. So yeah, like going back to, I guess, your question of different sports and different injuries, and how it affects you 100%. Because if I think in, say, taekwondo, one of the athletes, she fractured her finger, and she's having that different medications and injections, and her whole sport is almost sparring and using that hand as blocking, or to do punches. And a footballer can play with a fractured finger. It doesn't sound like very much. Or a rugby player can probably play through with it, but it's very different in different sports, and different muscles are used in different ways in these sports. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, then although all them sports have them mini bursts and explosions of like an ejection off a limb, you'll be able to spot certain movements where that action hasn't worked properly, won't you? So that'll be you overthinking as well. Maybe not overthinking. You spotted it, thinking I'm gonna have to watch number 16 here for a bit, or I'm gonna have to watch this person in Taekwondo now and see how that movement has changed. Because you'll see little, might not be a like the pop of an Achilles might hit, it might not be a crunch of a broken bone, but it could be the little subtlety of a little twinge that they've tried to hide by, like just standing up sharp a little bit, or you'll be spotting all them little signs that us fans don't really see.
Yeah, and again, time's moved on, hasn't it? You mentioned technology beforehand, and now anyone can put a social media video up of X injury. But if you're sat in a dugout, you might not even be seeing that properly live. You might have the coach or linesman or whoever in front of you, which makes your view very difficult. So you've then relying on your team, or you're relying on that player. So you can imagine kind of challenges of that, where you've got, yes, have you got a video replay or not? The higher up you go in leagues, yes, you will do. Lower leagues, you won't. You might have a doc in lower level football or rugby who's covering both the teams. You might, as the higher up you go, you might have two doctors covering one team, and it's kind of using those challenges to again, challenges and experiences to kind of make your decision making better. And if you're sat there in as a Premier League doc or a Super League doc with all the kind of things at your disposal, whether it's video replay or another colleague or someone mic'd up to you telling you what they think's happening in your ear, it's obviously very helpful stuff. But even then, it's still fraught with potential problems. A player could be massively hiding what's going on to you. Obviously, it's in their interest that they think they need to stay on the pitch. But you imagine lower level sport where you're now looking after both teams and you've missed something because you've been sorting out a different player, or the coach is not listening to a word you're saying. I don't care what you say, I'm going to put that player back on. It's fraught with potential problems, but actually that's why I say like it's a very good way of learning how to deal with real life massive sporting kind of challenges slash
Situation.
disasters, potential disasters, which people are trying to put you in, like as in, but if something goes wrong, then obviously the accountability will go on you, which isn't fair, but that's the way it goes. And um, yeah, it's not as straightforward as having Hawkeye and multiple different
Yeah, I can
technologies
imagine.
giving you 100 different angles, and your colleague being a concussion spotter, or someone in row B mic'd up with you and saying everything. It's not that kind of straightforward, but it's definitely improved and made our life easier in the kind of levels I work in anyway.
And the thing you've just mentioned slightly is the person in row B. It might not be mic'd up. It might be a fan. Like a lot of that's happened in the last few years, hasn't it? And they're saying the higher level football you're at, probably the best place you can be at because of the clientele that are there working and also spectating tend to be well trained. But it, yeah, you can't have eyes in the back of your head as well as on the pitch, mate, can you? It's just you've just got to be able to be responsive and reactive.
Yeah, and that's why you learn how to deal with a situation in a systematic way, and whether you've got an eye injury or a limb injury, or you're fighting for your life, you would, if you've not seen things properly, you have to deal with it in a systematic way and make sure people are their airways patent, or they're breathing normally, or they've got a pulse, and then kind of go into any distracting injuries and just things which normal, which a medic learns through whatever courses we go on or experiences we've had. It's almost kind of second nature, but is a real skill set behind that, and dealing with those scenarios. And it's almost taken for granted, if you like, that you've got someone in that position, but we all know it's how hard people have worked to kind of get to that level to deal with those situations. So the less obstacles you have in your way when it reaches that kind of crunch decision making, the less obstacles you have, whether it's any of those stakeholders we mentioned beforehand causing unnecessary extra noise, or social media, or the next things. It doesn't probably help that situation.
Right, mate. No, it's just you don't realise until you ask someone how much is actually going on, do you? And that's before you've done any prep work before a game, strapping, scanning, injections, all of that, meds, nutrients, and all that. It's nuts, really, mate. So when did you become fully involved in sport? Was it after the Waikato trip you went to Bradford then?
So no, I Waikato was part of still at medical school. So like you had
Yeah.
like that 10-week placement where you'd kind of decide what you wanted to do. So I did that sports degree, sports science degree. I then did that Waikato placement with a mate, and then started junior doctoring. So we do 2 years where you do different 4-month jobs, and you gain experience in various skills. But in my mind, I always knew I wanted to again go off and do sport. So I thought the next step, while other mates were going off to Australia, New Zealand, or doing a year of traveling or working abroad, I just thought, right, if I don't do this now, I might struggle later to do this or get the motivation to do it. So I did my a master's in sports medicine after those 2 years of work. That was in Nottingham uni, and after doing that, I then was umming and ahhing what to do. I went into GP training, and then GP training is 3 years. So I did that in kind of Wakefield, Pontefract, Dewsbury area, kind of area. And um, after I finished those 3 years, again, it was kind of decision time of, do you work as a GP? What do you want to do? Do you want to get involved? Could you get involved in sport? And I was quite late. Back then, I was quite normal in terms of when I was going to do it. But nowadays, I'm quite late when people make that decision, because people are getting younger and younger and getting more competitive, like I said, of when they're working in sport. So you've got people in the first year of qualifying who will have started working in sports teams and gaining experience early, which is great. Um, but yeah, so then I ended up, at one point I was gonna work on a cruise ship after I finished
Yeah.
GP training. I thought, right, what shall I do? And then I think saw something about cruise ship doctor, and then went through interviews, and I was pretty close to going on that for kind of, I think, 12 weeks on, 6 weeks off. If you're offshore X amount of time, then it's tax-free money. You're treated well as medical staff on board. I was like, right, this sounds like a bit of me. This.
Life. Yeah.
So, I was pretty close to doing that, and then I saw that through a guy who I'm good friends with now, who'd advertised the Bradford Bulls job. So then I was like, right, what shall I do? Like, as in, that's obviously a decent job. I want to potentially apply for that. So I just kind of followed gut and didn't take over that cruise ship dream, and stayed and worked in leafy Bradford instead.
Sounds a good swap, mate. So, what are you like in that new environment then, mate? Because you've not really had a choice with the career you've wanted to go and embrace them new environments and people and methods. Were you ever uncomfortable, mate, or was you always pretty happy to go into them new environments?
Yeah, I think, again, the way we were brought up, we were quite sociable creatures. We always had probably good interactions with whether it was mates or people through family or whatever. So it wasn't like we were shying away from communication. So I think communication has never really been a downfall, but I mean, others might say different about me, but I wouldn't say it was a downfall. It was more just the very unique situations, like you say, you're put in. It's completely different to having 10-minute appointments with the general public, and 10 minutes, bang, 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 seeing people, dealing with their kind of diagnosis and then management plan, and having a follow up, and maybe seeing them again a week or two later. This is, you are my team doctor, and um, expectations, again, different teams, different expectations, and going over there, all of a sudden, like saying, if you're in one day a week, you're expected to be answering the phone 7 days a week if there's something wrong with any of your players. And I remember a colleague who's a very good medic. He was just not shaped up to work in sport, because he was just, look, as soon as I leave the building at 5, I'm done. Like, I've worked hard nine
Not
to
in
five, and I was
sport.
like, you're in
Yeah.
the wrong environment. You can't be doing that in sport. Like, this is I could be sat twiddling my thumbs for an hour, and then equally I'll get called at a completely random time of the day and have to deal with something. And yes, you've got to set certain limitations and expectations with your patient kind of cohort, but you're in the wrong environment if you think that the demands of sport are completely different to anything else. And um, yeah, I think that was one thing which didn't really bother me too much, because I had that kind of expectation in my mind. But um, probably other bits which I found probably more challenging were just the external noise, like dealing with the different stakeholders, like we've said, um, and just people not listening to you. If you,
Yeah.
I don't care what you say, I'm playing, or like you've said before about, this is an X amount of weeks injury. I'm coming back in a day, a week, or whatever it is. So just dealing with those kind of scenarios, you didn't always get it right, and you just try to do kind of the best you or your team could do. And with that whole ethos of no matter what, you've got to have your own moral compass, and you've got to look after that patient athlete to the best of your ability. And if you can hold your head high and say that you have, then generally speaking, if you're a good doctor, a good person, then you will have done that.
Yeah, you go home and happy man then, mate, can't you? You can leave that where it is rather than take it home. Because imagine there's some things, mate, you just can't leave at work. Because work's never off for you, like you just said. Unfortunately, you are always on the end of the phone, aren't you? So how long did it last at Bradford, mate, and why did Bradford come to an end?
So Bradford was an interesting kind of, yeah, baptism of fire, I guess, from a first big job. Bradford were sadly in more of a decline at that point. Like I joined way after those amazing golden years of kind of 90s, 2000s. And when I joined in 2015, I believe it was pretty close to that administration time. And they were still a big team in the champ at that point, but um, it was kind of like anything else in life, full of ups and downs. And the downs over there, I was only in 1 day a week and doing games. As on top of that, other people, it was their livelihood, and watching people not getting paid, and then the club going under was sad to watch. And then people who I still stay in touch with, like to this day, and kind of discuss the memorable good times. Um, but yeah, in terms of why that finished, it finished because I got an opportunity at Rhinos, and a colleague who I'd known several years ago was kind of leading the department at that point, and got in touch and said if me alongside a few other docs wanted to take over the medical department, and jumped to the opportunity. I was living in Leeds, and Leeds was like a second home at that point. And at that point, obviously a Super League team and high flying, and I've been lucky where vast majority of the jobs I've gone to, it's almost, I mean, it'll probably upset a few people by saying it, but it's a step up. And by step up, I mean in terms of medically, it was a step up, not in terms of team standing. Um, if I look back at Bradford, it was the physio and me at that point in a championship team, and you were dealing with all sorts, and me as an inexperienced sports doctor at that point, and then you moved on where there wasn't very much medical provision in comparison to a Super League team where more could be spent on whether it was medical provision or medical staff. And all of a sudden you're in a place where it's much better organized, and kind of my learning definitely went up a lot of levels, working alongside experienced other colleagues who kind of pushed me on and learn off each other, and you're able to bounce things off a bit better. I think that's sadly in lower level sport, probably prior to COVID, where you had lots of WhatsApp groups and colleagues who all of a sudden were contactable. Um, Prior to that, lots of people will have been working in isolation, and makes it difficult to kind of be the best you can be when, whether it's making medical decisions or anything, whether it's contractual problems or just day-to-day problems. If you wanted to bounce off other people, if you can't do that, whatever the working environment, it makes it a lot tougher for that person. So again,
Yeah,
kind of now you almost kind of want to lend an ear to those kind of people, because they shouldn't be in a position where they are isolated, because being isolated can make them make poor decisions, or decisions which aren't to the best of their ability. So again, it's another one of those where you always want to make yourself available to colleagues who were struggling. So yeah, Leeds was a step up medically. and that started in 2017.
Right, and it's right that it was a hybrid with Yorkshire Carnegie, wasn't it, mate? You covered the rugby league team and the rugby union team.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, from a rugby union background of playing and growing up watching, compared to league, it's funny how quickly you get involved in a interest in sport. And I'd all of a sudden probably preferred rugby league to union at that point because you're watching it week in, week out, and watching it from a completely different angle to what you were kind of growing up playing a sport. But um, it was nice getting back involved with Union. So again, Carnegie, they were in the Prem just before we joined, and then I think they just reached the playoffs and didn't make it from the champ. So when we joined, I think they again were only in existence for another few years before they folded. And again, that was sad to kind of see. Because it was a great team to be involved in. One memory I've got of that was early doors, though, which out of the three docks who we were at the time, that was when Rhinos won the grand final 17. And then those two docks, they ended up having a right day at the grand final while I covered Carnegie v Richmond away, coming back on a train. So I'll never forget that one. But that was that was still good as a team looking back, like as in that was kind of showed the unity of a team. Like we all came back and we just all went wild and celebrated with everyone else in the Headingley. So yeah, good memories.
You're a bit unlucky there in early doors, haven't you? It's enough potentially to put someone new into sport medicine off, like go into that type of level, wouldn't it?
I mean, you could easily have a bad experience, and it can be an unforgiving world when you could be doing everything medically right, and again, like we said, your own moral compass, your own kind of barometer of what is medically right or wrong, and in everyone else's eyes it's wrong. You might have not even done anything wrong and you're just not flavor of the month anymore, or they don't like the
Yeah.
way you're talking or whatever it is, and then it can kind of lead to you moving on elsewhere, or you just having enough, or you don't like the way you're being spoken to by X. It's just it's yeah, very unique working environment. So you've got to be a certain character to work in it or want to work in it. You should never be in a position where you're being challenged to such a degree that you can't stick by your morals or your own kind of stick to your own guns. If you're being pushed into a corner where you feel uncomfortable, then clearly that should be first of all reported, and then you shouldn't stand by it. But yeah, sometimes it might not be as easy as someone saying that.
Yeah. I can appreciate that, to be fair, mate. Yeah, it's again a little bit of courage, isn't it? But how is it combining sports roles with your everyday role as well?
So at the end of the day, I'm a qualified GP, and if I ended up getting fired, sacked from all of my jobs tomorrow, then I would be a qualified GP, and I can't forget that and or neglect that type of work. And equally, a lot of your sports work involves day-to-day general practice problems, and it's the whether it's infections or skin related problems or mental health related problems. It's whatever it is, a lot of those things are general practice things. So it's again from a duty of care, it's you've got to be up to date with how those things are managed. And um, from a how it kind of differs is, as I've said, that 10-minute GP, 10-15 minute appointment, and then you might see that patient again with a follow up in a week, 2 weeks, or you might not see them again. But you're making a very quick, again, very different challenge, a quick history taking, make a diagnosis, give a treatment plan, and then off you go. Whereas with this, you can't get rid of that patient like that. Like that patient, that squad of 30 or 60 or 10 are yours, and they're yours full time. So
Yeah.
in a completely different challenge, um, you're looking after them, and then you're at their, again in inverted commas, beck and call. You're there to serve them to perform to the best of their ability, and you can't be that person who wants to say, I'm not answering the phone between 9 to like after 5. And once you get your head around that bit and the challenges associated with the kind of external stakeholders we've mentioned, it becomes a massively enjoyable job. And that's all part of the challenge. You are part of the team to deliver that success, that win, that trophy, and you're a big part of that. And yeah, medically, it's very, very, very different. All sorts of skills which you just would not have as a general practitioner. You are not learning pitch side management, like things like basic things you would have learned as a junior doc, whether it's suturing or dealing with a broken bone or things like that. You just wouldn't deal with as a GP because you don't see it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're dealing with that on a weekly basis in a contact sport like rugby, or taekwondo or football. So you become comfortable dealing with things which obviously other people don't are not overly comfortable with. And what are the things? I mean, clearly it's not normal to have some 20 stone, big, burly, 6'5" guy in your face shouting and screaming at you that they want to stay on a pitch when they're probably passed out from a concussion, and then you're trying to calm them down and gradually take them off. It's the only time where you can stand in front of someone that size and be like, hey, you're listening to me. So it's yeah, unique.
And you got involved with Jamaica, didn't you? Rugby league, mate. Who got you involved with that, and how was that?
Yeah, so continuing that kind of rugby league side of stuff, I believe that was 2019 maybe. Um, so one of our old colleagues we crossed paths at Leeds. He's got Jamaican heritage, and he was the physio for them at the time. And then they were looking for a doc. They just said, if you wanted to come down, meet everyone, and see if it's something which fits for you. And I mean, Jamaica's everyone's second favorite country, isn't it? It's as a rugby league wise, they probably fit my laid back style. They know how to have a good time. They
A bunch of people involved with Jamaica Rugby League, weren't there?
yeah, very good bunch of people, and kind of skills again to be involved from like legends of Super League down to League One, plus players from kind of back home in Jamaica for them. And um, very good to be involved in their first World Cup, their first kind of points on the board. And yeah, good experience. As in, that is a lot more kind of tournament style kind of sport, or looking after them kind of leading into that World Cup or whatever tournament. It's not a day to day demand or as such. So yeah, it's nice to give back to kind of say you're getting paid and you're in roles where whether it was in football or rugby or the roles where you're getting paid well or well enough to carry out the demands of those roles, to be in an environment where it's back to kind of the basic things that we need to make sure those are there, whether it's organization or the medical kit or the whatever. And again, it brings different challenges because what's taken for granted, the way we say we've learned things through mandatory medical kit or the procedures we do, that's not the same. Like as in whether it's Jamaica or 10 other different countries, they'll have their own way of doing stuff or not. and you have to bring your skill set again into that to make sure that you're looking after everyone to the best of your ability.
The other thing, mate, sorry, before we move on, is as a fan, and I won't be on my own with this, so it's mad, really, but you don't think of the level you've been at, you being the doctor as well.
In what respect? What do you mean?
So, do you know, like where you said like infections, um, like just general, without being rude to GP practice?
Yeah,
I I've never actually thought about a player coming to you saying, I've got this virus, or I've got this, or I've got this ailment. I just imagine they go to the doctors. But
and
really, it makes sense because you're there, aren't you?
that's one of your roles. Yeah. So
Yeah.
again, depending on your skill set, if I'm sat there as a A&E doc and I'm the team doc, or I'm a orthopedic surgeon and I'm the team doc, then they're not trained to be a GP. So then they might not feel comfortable dealing with that stuff, and then they might send it to their general practitioner. Same way I might not be as well versed as that A&E doctor at whatever emergency problem, or that orthopedic surgeon. I'm not a surgeon, so you've got to recognize your own skill set and like limitations, and then kind of handle appropriately. But yeah, these guys, they're guys, women, they're not superheroes. They've got the same problems we have.
Oh,
so
that's it. Yeah.
so
I
from
don't know why I've ever not thought that. Yeah,
but
that's mad.
but yeah, it's what's interesting with that is that then these guys are treated by us in that environment. So whether I'm sat there as Leeds Rhinos doc and then I'm Jamaica's doc, like then I'm dealing with them there, but then you're you're not their usual day-to-day person, and then their GP knows nothing. They might never have seen their GP. Like you've said, they,
Yeah.
depending on the standard of the level of the sport, they might have been seen by the version of me for the last decade, and they'll eventually, when they retire, go back to their usual doc, or if they go to A&E, they've got no idea who they are. They don't know anything about them
Don't
because
know they've existed. Yeah.
it's not on
Yeah.
their records. They've never seen them. So all the stuff which we will have done on them, whether it's like blood tests or heart scans or concussion testing or broken bones or surgeries or whatever it is, they turn up to their GP at the end of their career or halfway through and go, yeah, can I have X for this? And I'll be like, what are you on about? We don't know
I'll
anything.
have to go in naked and look at the battle scars, won't they? It'll
Yeah,
be a map,
exactly.
won't it? It'll be, oh, you've had shoulder recon here, you've had your knee here.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
that's where again it's a skill to give a good handover. To give a good handover, if someone left us at a club and moves on somewhere else, or they're retiring, it should be our duty of care to pass on that information and say that that player can show the right person if they need to, um, which isn't always the case.
I imagine as well, mate, not going too much into any story or name, but you're a confident as well. You're a agony aunt, I imagine, as well, if the load's getting too big or there's family problems or form's not great. You probably that shoulder to lean on that way as well. And who looks after you when you're looking after all these?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and that's it. It's an important question because at the end of the day, you're only human as well, right? So from a that player having again what a fan might not see, whether they're dealing with day-to-day struggles personally or through their families or whatever, or even if it's form related, whatever it is, they'll be dealing with their own personal struggles. And similarly, why wouldn't a member of the medical staff to as well? So that all goes down to again lots of other work which we do. You can see staff like different organizations and staff well-being and how important that is. If you're not looking after the people behind the scenes, looking after the money men, looking after the people who obviously draw in those crowds and make money for the for the sports team club organization, then if you're not being looked after that backroom person, then how can you deliver the best you possibly can for them? And sometimes that's not sport related, just in general. That's almost overlooked at times, and it's just do the basics properly, and the rest will follow.
Right. So AB3 Medical, mate, where did that come about from, and how much hard work was that to get up and running? And tell us where people can hear about it, see it, and know about it.
So AB3 Medical came about after a big case in football, which we were involved in Hull, which was about a player who had a near tragic event. When I joined within the first week, it's all in the public domain now, and he ended up having a DVT, so a blood clot in his leg. And as a fit, healthy 26-year-old guy, that is not normal. And then we started investigating him from head to toe, and found out that he wasn't performing anywhere near his usual self. He was short of breath. He was struggling, and it was because he had undiagnosed, untreated blood clots, which were just stagnant in his lungs. After doing loads of tests on him, found out that he was had undiagnosed, untreated inflammatory bowel condition. That then unfortunately led to bowel cancer. He then ended up missing out of his, say, 3-year contract, the vast majority of that. He ended up then kind of coming back, and remarkably, he's doing amazingly well. He's back and been in professional sport for the last few years and playing, and highly successful now in Scotland. And
Amazing that.
it's amazing. And through that process, I joined in September that year, and in the January he joined on transfer deadline day, and certain information didn't get passed on properly. And if it did get passed on, maybe the club wouldn't have signed him. But more importantly, during that whole period of time between January and September, my predecessor and then me could have dealt with things a bit differently and potentially stopped a lot of the problems which he had. And that then led to a big court case between Hull and the other club, and Hull ended up kind of winning a $1 million settlement from it. It was like a bit of a landmark case where there was non-medical disclosure between the two clubs. I knew for a fact that there was poor handover of medical care between clubs in different sports, and that was happening across the board. And I knew that despite all the good medical care which is provided, if you're not, as we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, if you're not passing on that information, if that player goes to a new club and you don't, I've got my hands tied behind my back and I'm blindfolded if I don't know about their condition properly, or that A&E doc, if they don't know what's going on with them, or that person abroad, or that new pitch side doctor, if they don't know the actual history behind that problem, you can't expect them to deal with them properly. So then that led me to do a load of research across all of my colleagues in football and rugby, and basically prove that what I already know, really, the problems which
factual.
And yeah, it came with some pretty frightening kind of stats of all the different systems people were on, and how poor kind of that handover is. And that then led me to think, right, I can either just publish all this, or is there anything I can do? So I thought, instead of an organisation facing kind of system, surely, a bit like the NHS app, surely a player, the dream scenario is that they get put on something at the beginning of their career, on an app, and then that follows them around wherever they go. So they will always have that as a point of reference for them, where they can look at that heart scan, that blood test, that injury, like you've said, battle scars over their body, like look at things which they've completely forgotten because it happened 5 years, 10 years ago, and they can show that next medic somewhere. And
I love that. That's a brilliant. It
that's what
should be mandatory anyway, but that's amazing. That.
So
Congratulations on that. I like that.
yeah, thanks. And I mean, from that, it was like a medical passport app. But then while they're under my care, I am writing the information, and then while they move on to a different club, I would then get taken off it, and then with the player's consent, new medic would get put on it. But then it would allow third party um, medics to write stuff on it. So if it was that A&E docs abroad, um, medics any like as in new pitch side medics wherever, like they would be able to directly input stuff onto their app so that the usual medic could read it. So just I think the difference is because you've lived and breathed all of these issues over years of working in sport and what lots of colleagues have, you understand the frustrations with kind of the current limitations with it. So it's one of those things where the more people you speak to, how on earth does something like that not exist? Like as
Yeah.
in already, and it's true, but it's like anything else unless someone actually does it. So yeah, that then led to me kind of going on a different tangent and doing all the work in sport, but creating a business and going in the world of business development and different challenges that way. And yeah, I've learned a lot. It's been kind of lots of ups and downs and lots of kind of positives and people who are on board in it, and lots of athletes and medics and people who we know who've pushed it forwards and using it. Um, so yeah, it's a learning curve, and it's exciting, and it's not related to sport. It's related to, the more I thought about it, I was thinking lots about the sports I was involved in, but it's any sport. It's any sport.
Yeah.
It's not sport. It's literally anything in private care. So whether you are um, working on a airline or an oil rig or a continuously going abroad, like there's a place for it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
so,
amazing, that mate. It is. That should be mandatory, I think. Where you've, I know you've experienced the good and the bad of, the info handover and the medical handover now, but surely that should be mandatory now, an accurate,
yeah, I think
updated, honest handover.
yeah, I think that from a medical standpoint, it's a basic requirement, and it's like anything else. You it takes time to actually influence the people to push that forwards, and um, we'll get there. Whether it's my system or another system which follows the same principle, it's a lot of the things are organization facing alone, and that's all very well and good because you need to have that so that the medical team or that organization are protected by writing notes, but equally it's a patient's right to have access to their record, and more importantly it impacts their the level of care they receive in that day or future if they're seeing someone different who doesn't have access to it. So yeah, it's a very basic right which a patient should have. So it's definitely something which should and will hopefully exist in the near future. Um, so yeah, watch this
Oh, well
space.
done, mate. Where can people find it, or is it still in development, Ronnie? Or
No, it's been live and working for the last couple of years. It's AB3 Medical, so you can go on the website and see it. And then we had lots of rugby league guys giving their kind of input or experiences, whether it's medical staff or players. So there'll definitely be players there you recognise will just talk about their own things, whether it's a big injury or retiring and then thinking, oh, I've got access to all my stuff. Oh, no, I haven't. I've been at 10 different clubs and none of them are speaking to each other. So, like, how am I going to get that for that insurance claim? Or how am I going to get that to go and show my GP for that really complicated problem I've got? Um, so, yeah, it's real life experiences of genuine kind of day to day events which really do happen on a regular basis. So yeah, you can see it on the website, but you can download it on the App Store as well. But various other bits which we've put on there from to push health promotion. Again, it's for sport, but it's for anyone, and there are various health questionnaires on there which, whether it's doing a medical screen or doing a heart screen or doing what we call the red flag questionnaire, things where by completing that, these are all free things which you can do on it, and it will alert people of potential problems they have, completely oblivious to it. So whether it's a heart problem which they're experiencing through dizziness or fainting or palpitations, or whether it's skin lesion or bleeding from somewhere in their body, or things which people don't think is a problem, they then fill out that questionnaire and go, I've just been sitting on this for X amount of time, I need to go and see a doctor now. So people have access to that basic thing on there, which you can download and have a look at. But yeah, it's something which I'm very passionate about, and I definitely will carry on pushing as long as I work in sport, and then afterwards for sure.
Yeah, no, that's special. That well done for that. And now we've mentioned football a little bit, I imagine because of the money that's involved, and if they'd have known X player might have failed the medical if it was well known, or might not have got signed. Still doesn't make it right for me, that, but that's why it's obviously was hidden. But that's another thing. How did you find your time in football, mate? And what about it did you find the most challenging?
So again, I think I had a good base from working in years of rugby league, and um, doing that. The opportunity of Hull came up. They were advertising for a doc, and I jumped at the opportunity to apply for that, and that was where my parents still are, and our kind of hometown club, and they've bounced to and from the Premier League in the last kind of 10-15 years. So a big club, and opportunity to kind of get my teeth into football. So joined there, and I was doing that probably a couple of days a week at the time, and doing that alongside a bit of GP, and then doing the Leeds Rhinos alongside that. And it was just completely different challenges, like we've said, different expectations, completely different mindset of injuries to a degree to rugby league. You can't deal with, as you I think said at the beginning, that certain injury in rugby league will be dealt with slightly differently in football. The I remember, in fact, one of the first games was one of the I think it was one of the senior players at the time in football, and I'm on the sideline. He's probably plays into the stereotype this, but he was holding his ankle, rolling around in pain, kind of yelling the whole place down. And I was like, he's got to come off. He's breaking his ankle. And I've gone back into super, like a really inexperienced doc again with the experienced physio, and he was like, no, hold on, like he's all right. And then like within 10 seconds he'd gone from that to kind of stop yelling. Within 10 seconds more he's up and he's bouncing around, and I was like, wow, I've got a lot to learn here. It's like you're on about kind of
Yeah.
dark arts, etc. Like that wouldn't happen on a rugby league field. Um, so yeah, like just various experiences. It's been amazing. It's been a roller coaster of kind of on the pitch, off the pitch, lots of different medical kind of challenges, just from interesting cases, and um, again, working alongside rugby at the same time has only made me a better doctor, really, from experiencing different injuries. And again, you build up all sorts of relationships with people, whether it's Hull, Leeds, other place in Yorkshire, where you've then got a base of specialists or colleagues who you can kind of hand over care to or refer to if that player needs it. And um, yeah, it's been a really good experience overall.
So how did Taekwondo come about, and
Yeah, so
where did that fit in? Because you is a
when,
busy man, aren't you?
so yeah, I think at that point I was something eventually had to drop, and I cut down on my regular GP, and then a colleague mentioned about Taekwondo, GB Taekwondo job in Manchester came up, and um, I was probably about a year and a half plus before the Olympics, and from my personal sports kind of ambitions, Taekwondo realistically wasn't something which I was overly interested in at the beginning. Um, and then when he mentioned it, I was like, to be fair, like as in going there, going to the Olympics as a potential, getting involved in a completely different sport, individual sport, men, women, Paralympic kind of athletes, like something which I definitely want to learn a bit more about. So went down there, and it's incredible. It's like even just walking through the centre where they are, you've got all of the different athletes who are world champions and Olympians and all of their achievements, and you walking through, and you actually can start, as I mentioned before, you start getting into something which you didn't realize you had an interest in beforehand. And um, you think after years of doing football and rugby that you're a much better, well-rounded doctor, and then you went off and did that, and it was again completely different challenges and eye-opening in terms of what they put their bodies through and how they fight back, and what they can, not always in a good thing, in a good way, what they can potentially put their bodies through and fight through. So getting that experience and giving your experience to them about what is right, what is wrong, um, from the athlete perspective, and educating them that fighting through things isn't always the answer. Again, it's a similar conversation you have with rugby players on a regular basis and footballers on a regular basis. So yeah, Taekwondo came about from taking that opportunity. That was, and still is, it's like a couple of days a week, couple of half days, or a day a week, and really enjoy it. It's given me the opportunity of going to places like Baku for a world championship, um, or Paris for the Olympics, and just experiencing that is something I would have done in football or rugby. And to be part of those athletes' journeys, and like I said, like the medical decision making you have to make is very different in certain respects to the team sports. And you also got to think these guys are, despite being overall colleagues, if you're in the same weight category, you're fighting against each other. And it's it's an interesting dynamic. And from, again, medically, just thinking out loud, there's various other things which you don't have in those team sports, like weight restriction. I'd never been involved in a martial art or boxing or anything like that where you might weight restrict. So again, that in itself brings different medical um, side of things, and working closely with that kind of multidisciplinary team, the nutritionists and physios to kind of deal with those demands.
Well, you've an half had yourself tested, mate, haven't you? So, but again, like, what experiences and memories that you've got from that? So it's amazing, mate. Yeah, and where you find the time and energy is beyond me, because that coffee wasn't very big before, mate. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
Right, mate. I
well, again,
appreciate it. What was that? Sorry.
no, I was going to say again, it's one of those where probably by in heart you still think you're a lot younger than you are, and you're gaining all these experience, etc. And there'll be a point where you just say that you have to say no and look after yourself, and whether it's kind of starting a family or kind of other kind of personal kind of things, issues, or kind of progressions in your life, you eventually can't say yes to everything, and you have to pick and choose a bit more what you want to do. Again, that's not sport, is it? That's just generally in how life
General.
goes.
Yeah. Right, mate. So, couple of questions for you to end the chat on. Did you ever have any pre-event or pre-match superstitions?
From medically, no. I think from you hear all sorts. People
Yeah.
will have their own thing, whether it's smelling salts and doing that, or you've got to be the person next to the changing room and giving everyone a high five um yeah, weird and wonderful things. Me myself, I've never had any superstition as such beforehand. I think the main thing is, which you can definitely be caught out by, is if you aren't switched on, like as in for the game, or you're switched on at the beginning of the game or after half time or whatever it is. I think yeah, you've got a role to play, and you can very easily just have momentary kind of lapse or having a laugh with someone, and then you've got to immediately be switched on. So superstition, no. Being switched on, probably should be immediately, quite quickly, more often. So yeah, let's leave that one as that.
Yeah. So your favourite stadium you've been at, mate?
Favorite stadium would, oh well, I'm a childhood Man U fan, so going to Old Trafford, and probably not so.
Suffering now, aren't we? Bless us, because we've had them glory years, mate. We're
Yeah,
getting some stick now.
glory years have to get back, I think, and I'm not sure when that's going to happen at this rate. But from I
Yeah.
think Old Trafford was, yeah, good experience. Challenge Cup, sorry, yeah, no, Challenge, was that Challenge Cup or
Grand final at Old Trafford,
Grand
yeah.
final? Sorry,
Grand
Grand
final,
Final. Yeah,
yeah.
the Grand Final. Well, bad memories from Grand Final because I didn't go to that one when I was covering
Yeah.
Richmond. So I did that beforehand, but then still experienced it with the Grand Final.
Yeah.
Lost a couple of years ago, so that one. But then, oh, and obviously whether it's classed as an away one or not, Wembley, and
Yeah.
doing Challenge Cup and winning that was pretty good.
I bet it was, mate. I bet it was. So something you tell yourself now if you seen the younger you, what would it be?
The younger me, enjoy those days where you had more hair. I think it'd probably be the
I'm
laughing
getting
one.
there, mate. I know I'm holding on just.
And then probably a serious one would be just grasp every opportunity with both hands. Don't be afraid, and yeah, grasp every opportunity because you don't know if it's going to happen again.
Yeah. And say you've had a few beers, mate, because you've had a good win and you've been in a good arena and or you've had a good result in a tournament. If the microphone comes in your hands, Ronnie, what you giving us?
Stevie Wonder, Superstition.
Oh, class. Getting
First
everyone
time.
involved.
Yeah, they don't really do it in rugby as much, but in footy you have to get up as a new member, whether you're a staff member or new player. You've got to get up and give a song. So it's definitely something which should be introduced in all sports, I think.